The universe held its breath as Blaze stepped up to the starting line. This was it, the moment that would be etched into the annals of history, the instant a human would attempt the impossible. Blaze had always been different, even among his own kind. Born on a remote colony at the edge of the galaxy, he grew up dreaming of the stars, of pushing the boundaries of what was physically and mentally achievable. While the other colonists toiled in the hydroponic farms and oxygen refineries, Blaze spent every spare moment training his body and mind, honing himself into a perfectly calibrated instrument of speed, strength, and precision. His journey to this moment had been a long and arduous one. The colony where he grew up, Novus Prime, was a harsh and unforgiving place, a world of extremes where only the toughest and most adaptable could hope to survive. From an early age, Blaze had to fight for every advantage, scrapping with the other colony kids for the best morsels from the nutrient vats, braving the toxic winds that howled across the planet's surface during the long, dark winters. But adversity only fueled his determination. While his peers huddled in the shelters, whiling away the long hours with idle games and pointless squabbles, Blaze was out in the elements, pushing himself to run faster, jump higher, endure longer. He studied the techniques of the greatest athletes from across the galaxy, adapting their training regimens to his own unique physiology and circumstances. As he grew into adulthood, Blaze's reputation began to spread beyond the confines of Novus Prime. He dominated the local competitions, setting records that seemed scarcely believable. Some whispered that he must be using banned performance enhancers, that no ordinary human could achieve such feats. But those who knew him best understood that his only advantage was an unquenchable drive to be the best version of himself. It was this reputation that eventually caught the attention of the Intergalactic Sports Federation. They had never had a human competitor before, but Blaze's times were simply too extraordinary to ignore. And so, after a battery of tests to confirm his eligibility and clean bill of health, Blaze found himself on a starship bound for the ISF's Grand Arena, ready to test his mettle against the greatest athletes the galaxy had to offer. Now, as he stood on the starting line, staring down the track that stretched out before him like a ribbon of possibility, Blaze felt a sense of calm wash over him. This was what he was born to do, the culmination of a lifetime of preparation and sacrifice. He knew every being in the stadium was watching him, the human upstart, the unknown quantity. But he also knew, with a certainty that surged through his veins like liquid fire, that they were about to witness something they would never forget. In the press box high above the arena, Zaphod anxiously fiddled with his recording instruments. The Qortaxian journalist had covered hundreds of ISF championships over his long career, but none had ever filled him with such anticipation and unease. Humanity was still the new kids on the galactic block, their homeworld itself only recently discovered. Few knew what to make of this upstart species who had burst onto the scene seemingly out of nowhere. Their reputation for adaptability, creativity, and sheer audacity preceded them, but how would one of their own fare against the superlative beings assembled here today? As the starting gun sounded, Zaphod found he was holding his breath. Time seemed to dilate as Blaze exploded from the starting blocks, becoming a supersonic blur of motion. Zaphod's 4 eyes could barely track him as he blazed down the track, legs pumping like biomechanical pistons. The other racers, athletes at the pinnacle of their species, they may as well have been standing still. Blaze flashed across the finish line a full 2 seconds ahead of his nearest competitor, a simply unheard of margin of victory. The stadium erupted into a cacophony of astonishment and confusion as the scoreboard flashed the official results, a new galactic record, shattered by a staggering margin. In the stands, a hush fell over the spectators as they struggled to process what they had just witnessed. Some stared at the scoreboard in disbelief, others at the human who was now nonchalantly jogging back to the starting line, as if he hadn't just rewritten the laws of physical possibility. Among the audience was Zorn Athi, the supreme ruler of the Krallian Empire. Known across the galaxy for his cold, calculating demeanor and the merciless efficiency with which he had conquered a dozen star systems, even he now leaned forward in his seat, his normally impassive features etched with fascination. This human. Blaze, was it, he mused, his voice a guttural rumble. He bears watching. Such raw potential, if properly harnessed, could be a valuable asset, or a dangerous threat. On the field below, Blaze was already preparing for his next event, oblivious to the shock waves he had just sent reverberating through the galaxy. For him, this was just the beginning, the first step on a journey that would push him, and by extension his entire species, to the very limits of greatness. Over the next 3 days, Blaze continued to dominate the competition in a way no one had ever seen before. In event after event, he not only claimed victory but seemed to almost casually redefine what victory could mean. The high jump, the javelin toss, the grueling decathlon. In Blaze's hands, they became acts of artistry, displays of power and grace that left his fellow athletes slack-jawed with awe and not a little fear. In the evenings, the athletes' village was abuzz with rumors and speculation. Some claimed Blaze was the product of secret genetic experimentation, a human engineered for perfection. Others whispered that he had made a pact with the enigmatic beings known as the Void Walkers, trading his soul for a taste of their legendary prowess. The more pragmatic analyzed his every move, trying to deconstruct the biomechanics behind his incredible feats. Blaze himself paid little heed to the furor swirling around him. He remained focused on his training, on the next challenge, the next opportunity to push himself beyond the brink. In quiet moments, he could be found in his quarters, poring over data from his performance analytics, looking for any marginal gain, any small refinement that could shave a fraction of a second off his time or add a millimeter to his leap. It was this dedication, this all-consuming passion for his craft, that caught the eye of Zyrene, the Arcturian hurler who had won the ISF shot put competition for the past 7 cycles running. She had been watching Blaze with a mixture of professional respect and personal fascination, marveling at the way he seemed to approach every event not just as a challenge to be overcome, but as an opportunity for self-discovery and growth. One evening, as Blaze was returning from a grueling session on the track, Zyrene fell into step beside him. "You know, you're causing quite the stir," she said, her melodic voice tinged with amusement. "Half the athletes here are convinced you're some kind of deity in disguise. The other half are petitioning to have humanity reclassified as its own competitive category." Blaze chuckled, wiping a sheen of sweat from his brow. "I'm no deity," he said. "Just a guy who loves to push himself. Isn't that why we're all here? To see how far we can go, how much we can achieve." Zyrene cocked her head, her large, luminous eyes studying him intently. "Perhaps. But I think for you it goes deeper than that. I've seen the way you train, the way you push yourself past the point of exhaustion, past the point where anyone else would have long since given up. It's as if you're not just chasing records, but something else, something inside yourself." Blaze was silent for a long moment. I suppose I've always felt like I was meant for something more," he said at last. "Like there was some purpose I was meant to fulfill, some potential I was meant to realize. When I'm out there pushing myself to the limit, that's when I feel most alive, most connected to that sense of purpose." Zyrene nodded slowly. "I think I understand," she said. "And I think, perhaps, that's what frightens some of the others. Because in you, they see a glimpse of what we might all be capable of if we were willing to push ourselves as hard as you do. You're not just challenging records, Blaze. You're challenging the very limits of what we believe is possible." As the ISF competition reached its final day, the excitement in the stadium had reached a fever pitch. The stands were packed with spectators from across the galaxy, all eager to witness the conclusion of what had already been the most electrifying games in living memory. But all eyes were on the track, where Blaze was preparing for his final event, the grueling 10,000-meter run. It was a race that required not just speed but endurance, strategy, and sheer force of will. A race that would push even the galaxy's greatest distance runners to their breaking point. As Blaze took his place at the starting line, he could feel the weight of 1,000 worlds' expectations bearing down on him. But rather than buckling under the pressure, he felt a strange sense of calm, of clarity. This was his moment, the culmination of everything he had worked for, everything he had endured. The starting gun fired, and the runners were off. From the very first stride, Blaze shot to the front of the pack, setting a blistering pace that had his competitors struggling to keep up. Lap after lap, he maintained his lead, his form never wavering, his face a mask of determination. In the stands, Zaphod watched transfixed, his heart pounding in his chest. He had seen many incredible athletic feats over his long career, but nothing that could compare to the raw, unbridled power he was witnessing now. With every stride, every surging step, Blaze seemed to be redefining the very meaning of the word fast. As the race entered its final lap, something incredible happened. One by one, the other runners began to fall away, unable to match Blaze's relentless pace. Soon he was all alone on the track, a solitary figure pounding towards the finish line. And then, with a burst of speed that left the entire stadium gasping, he crossed the line, shattering the galactic record by an astonishing 10 seconds. The roar that went up from the crowd was like nothing Zaphod had ever heard before. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated awe, a primal cry of witness to the impossible made manifest. On the podium, Blaze stood tall, his eyes shining with a fierce, proud light as the gold medal was placed around his neck. In the days and weeks that followed, Blaze's incredible feat would be dissected and analyzed from every angle. Scientists would pore over the biometric data, trying to unravel the secrets of his superhuman performance. Philosophers would debate the implications of a human achieving what had once been thought to be the exclusive domain of the galaxy's most advanced species. But for Blaze, the true significance of his achievement lay not in the accolades or the analysis, but in the way it had made him feel the sense of pure, unbridled potential, the exhilarating knowledge that he had pushed himself beyond the boundaries of what anyone had thought possible, and found something extraordinary waiting on the other side. It was a feeling he knew he would spend the rest of his life chasing, a quest that would take him to the farthest reaches of the galaxy and the deepest depths of his own being. For he had tasted the essence of what it meant to be truly alive, truly awake, and he knew, with a certainty that burned in his bones, that he could never go back to the way things had been before. And so, as he stood there on the podium, basking in the adulation of the crowd, Blaze made a silent vow. He would be the spark that ignited a new era of human achievement, the trailblazer who showed his species the way to a future brighter and more boundless than any they had dared to imagine. He would be the one who turned the impossible into the inevitable, one record, one feat, one transcendent moment at a time. The galaxy would never be the same again. The age of Blaze had begun,